My name is Ore Van. I'm the resource specialist and CEO for Natap and David Consulting, which is a leading provider of solutions and expertise across a number of organizations in Nigeria. We handle human development, operations and strategy, research, business engineering, and amongst others within the industries here in Nigeria. So you are welcome to this afternoon or evening webinar, morning webinar in the US and evening in Nigeria. Today we are starting a series of leadership lessons, and it's on navigating COVID-19 and emerging stronger, lessons for all leaders in various industries. Here we have international speakers. We have own Mazi Sam Ohaboa, OFR, President, Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria. You're welcome, sir. Welcome, Mazi. He was the former CEO of Pfizer Africa. Aside that, we have Mr. Scott Marshall Braddon. Mr. Braddon, you're welcome. He's a consultant, a strategist, an author, a speaker. Then he's also a co-owner of Litrof Consulting, LLC, Santa Clara, California, USA. You're welcome. And in addition, we are having Mr. Kenneth Odushola Stevenson, who is going to moderate this conversation while I just make some introductions and we kick off immediately. Before we start, I just want to make a few announcements that if you have questions, please just type them on the chat. We'll resolve all of that. And then there will actually be a time also for people to probably ask questions, and all the questions will be tackled. So today, I just want to give a brief summary of our speakers. Mazi Ohaboa is a pharmacist from the University of Ife then, but now OAU. That is Obafemi Awolowo University in 1976. He took some trainings, a postgraduate training from the business and organizational management from the University in New York, USA, and also from Lagos Business School. He joined Pfizer in 1978 as a pharmacist and rose to the level of a chairman and CEO of Pfizer Africa in 1993. While he was there, he led the buyover of Pfizer Incorporated PLC to Nimet International Pharmaceutical PLC. He retired voluntarily from the industry after 30 years, having served as CEO for 18 years. Mazi, actually welcome to this program. Mazi holds a lot of portfolios in various organizations in Nigeria and outside Nigeria. He holds some various professional organizations, Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria, for example, the Nigerian Academy of Pharmacy, the West African Postgraduate College, the Nigerian Institute of Management, the National Institute of Marketing of Nigeria, the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, the Institute of Management Consultants, and he's also been, just mentioning a few, he's also been past chairman in various organizations, including the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association. He was also the past chairman of Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, just to mention a few. Mazi founded the Sam Ohaboa Foundation for Economic Empowerment in 2009 and serves as the managing consultant of Starteam Consult, and he is also on the board of several organizations. Mazi, you are welcome to this webinar this afternoon, and it's a privilege to actually have you here on board. Welcome, sir. And the next speaker is Mr. Scott Braddon, has devoted the past 35 years building and researching complex organizational systems, including 25-year tenure as Executive Director at Lincoln Center, and now as co-founder of Litrof Consulting LLC. Using his Imagination, Creativity, Innovation Index, ICIC Index, he delivers a bottom line and outcome-based practice design to foster inclusion, diversity, and equity while improving organizational systems centered around commerce, culture, and education. His latest focus is within medicine, coining the phrase precision education based on diversity metrics and big data. Mr. Scott is interested in supply of PPE or various COVID-19 tests nationwide or even worldwide. At Lincoln Center, he created Imagination Conversation IC series of 60 civic dialogues over 8-meter views to show how imagination-based outcomes impact change variables and increase the organizational budget and endowment by over 350%. Currently, Mr. Scott is creating concepts for another IC series, this time across the globe. He co-authored Imagination First, and today, Mr. Scott has a lot of strengths in some key areas. And these strengths include systems management / strategy planning, fundraising, evaluation and research, inclusive and directed communication. Mr. Scott, in summary, you are welcome to this webinar.
Thank you much.
Okay. I'm going to actually hand over to Mr. Kenneth Odushola Stevenson that will anchor this program properly. Mr. Kenneth Odushola is a renowned publisher, journalist, CEO, and chairman of various organizations. And he's here with us, Mr. Kenneth Odushola Stevenson. He's also the chairman and the CEO of Nataf and David Consulting. He is the publisher of Inside Business Africa, CED Magazine, and the MD and CEO of Century 21 Systems. You are welcome, sir.
What? Very much, Mrs. Van. You've actually done a very good job by actually introducing our speakers. Today, I must also use this opportunity to thank Mr. Scott Brandon and Mazi Samohabowa to come and share their experiences and lessons learned in relation to the current situation, the COVID-19. All right. The reason I'm saying this is because quite a number of conversations had gone on, especially in recent times, with this COVID-19 issue. It's not the first time we are having this particular pandemic. We've had it several years ago, hundreds of years ago. Let me start by saying that there is no denying that the devastating coronavirus is overshadowing all previous health and economic crises. Still, leaders in government and business alike can and should draw lessons from those earlier challenges that help address the grim realities thrust upon us by COVID-19. We simply don't have time to reinvent the wheel. It is already here with us. To be sure, we have faced down a number of trying health, economic, security, and crises over recent years. Amongst the health challenges in recent years and in recent memories is including AIDS, SARS, AN1, and Ebola, hyperglobalization. The same applies the paystack crisis, the financial crisis, the Great Recession, national level meltdown in the interview years. Having had a front role and managing and helping other CEOs, companies, and many other crises in recent years, our speaker today, including Mazi Samohabuwa, the current president of Pharmaceutical Society of Engineers, Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria, and Mr. Brandon Scott, who are going to share their experiences and also draw lessons from previous experiences of pandemics, especially including financial crisis, and lend their voices to how we can make the new normal something that we cannot live with, and something that we must do to express ourselves and also be able to grow. We are doing this today because we believe that it is very, very important that the lessons that have been learned within this period could actually help many leaders of today to navigate the process and build corporates that can answer the questions that our speakers can provide answers to. Some of which include communication, caring, organization, consistencies, and many others. I would like to, at this point in time, start very quickly to call on our speakers to talk along the line of this navigating COVID-19 leadership lessons that we can take away from this crisis and move forward to build enterprises, governments, businesses, and even our planet. Thank you again, our speakers. And let me start with Mr. Scott, who is actually joining us all the way from California in the United States of America to lend his voice to this conversation and provide some solutions for leaders. Mr. Scott, I'd like to thank you very much, and would like to start with you.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, one and all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. It's always hard to talk about something when you're not there. There's always an abstract quality to it. Quite literally, what is going on, not only with the disease itself, but with the community, with the response to it. So I'm I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, forced to be a bit abstract because I'm not in there with you experiencing it. I'm experiencing it here in New York or in California. But I'd like to start with an image. And it's an image that comes out of change process theory that excites me a lot, which is we often turn to, when we're talking about change, we often talk about the difference between thinking outside of the box as good and staying in the normal or staying with inside the box as bad. Thinking inside the box isn't a productive quality. I'd like to challenge that to start within my own work. I don't believe that most organizations, most governments, and most individuals are actually capable of or designed in a way to think outside the box. I think what we actually do is think inside the box. And so if you think of the box for a second as this container, as this structure, and that box could be a business, that box could be a social construct, that box could be governmental mandates. It almost doesn't matter. But the question that I want to pose is, if you think of containers and all the elements we live in as inside the box, the question that we have to raise is, how do we change the box? How do we make the box more malleable? How do we open it up? Rather than forgetting boxes or forgetting containers and forgetting structures, the question that I'd like to keep posing is, how do we change it from within, rather than thinking that the responsibility is just to forego it and design a whole new box or think a whole new box. In the culture of Silicon Valley, where I live, if you're a startup, you're always thinking inside the box, interestingly, until you can decide how disruptive you can be. If you're an established business, you're doing it in reverse. You're trying to figure out how to get to thinking inside the box. So I'd also like to propose that, and this is an educator statement, is that we be pragmatic optimists, that we not be naive, we not be Pollyanna, we not be without data and without information, but that we always stay optimistic. And I say that because as an educator and as a business leader, if I'm not positive and optimistic, it's hard to keep those around me positive and optimistic. But I use the term pragmatic optimism because I believe that we have to stay pragmatically optimistic, not naively optimistic, not blindly optimistic. And the last is, I think that the work that's going on internationally around COVID, the 9/11 report, if any of you happened to see it after 9/11 in the United States, there was an entire chapter on that it was a failure of the imagination. And there was a statement made in that chapter which absolutely changed my life, changed my perspective. And this coming out of a governmental agency, a governmental study, said that we need to routinize, bureaucratize, and institutionalize imagination. I mean, take a second and think about that. When you think about imagination, you don't normally think of it as a capacity or as a tool that everyone has, everyone uses. We tend to think of it in fairly rarefied terms. Steve Jobs had it. Who had it and who didn't have it? I believe that we're all born with it. We're all capable of it. It has to be nurtured. It has to be developed. And that so much of what we're trying to do is develop that imaginative capacity for how we think and how we act. So COVID itself, I'm confused, to be honest. I don't know from the press coverage and from talking with friends and colleagues exactly how it's being addressed here or around the world. I did go online and took a look at some data points from how in your country, in your world, this is depicted. But what I'd like to say is that the term precision education was used in reading my bio. I use the term precision education in that it's not unlike precision medicine in oncology. Is if you really want to study what's going on, you have to both study an N of one, you have to study each individual, but you have to study that individual against a very large data point. Mazi in his work, I'm sure, has been dealing with this for many, many years over research and pharmaceutical research. You have to make sure it works for the many, and you have to make sure it works for the one. But each N of one is different. Each N of one has its own unique qualities. And in a 21st century complex world where environmental conditions, educational conditions, cultural conditions, economic conditions drive so much of what's going on in the world, we need to keep going back to big data studies against N of one relationships and figure out how to address not only this complex disease, this complex pandemic, but the ones that have happened before and the ones that will tragically happen over the next decades. So with that, I think we have to look at how we think. We have to stay optimistic but pragmatic. We have to think inside the box, and we have to look at a precision education and a precision medicine approach to this. And lastly, all that is based on the ability to think imaginatively and act creatively. IBM did a study a number of years ago of what business leaders around the globe, they interviewed 1,500 business leaders, want in their workforce. And within the top three, often the top one was critical and creative thinkers. So we have to create that mindset, that capacity for that. And all that comes out of the picture or the portrait I'm trying to paint.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Brandon. I think you've been able to draw our mind to the issue of precision. If you can hear me, the issue of precision. In other words, yes, this particular thing came in, even though some other countries may have been aware before we even knew it. But what happened is that as at the time we knew it, no nation around the world prepared for it. And it came. But the way to handle it from what you're saying is using the word precision means that we will know that it is here. There's nothing we can do about it. The only thing we can do is to, look into our boxes and come up with that particular word precision and handle it so that at the end of the day, it doesn't give us, it doesn't do so much damage. We've been seeing how it's happening in the United States. It has actually gone very, very high. There's been a lot of spikes in some states like Texas and a couple of other states. And we've also seen that even in other countries like Australia, there's the new outbreak and they're going to lock down some other areas. And it keeps going and coming back and forth, which means that it is either we now understand that we must work within the context of the COVID-19 and navigate the process to be able to achieve whatever we need to achieve. And also, why not, forgetting the whole protocols of the safety and the rest of these things. So, but what is important is that nations are opening up. For instance, the United States President Donald Trump, he believes that, okay, fine, let's go back to our new normal and start working again, because if we don't do that, something might happen. In Nigeria today, the flights within the country started operating because we can't actually go on for too long without having some commercial activities happening around the country. So countries around the world are also doing things to move forward, which is, yes, it is a period of precision that we must take action, and also why not forgetting the protection service, the precautionary measures, but we must also do something about it. Now, let me just go to Mazi Sam Ohabuwa, who is the current president of Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria. Mazi has a very long, just like Mrs. Scott must have mentioned, very worthy experience in this kind of precision issues, because at the end of the day, when Pfizer was going to divest in Nigeria, and he actually put some funds, along with friends together to buy some of the shares out of Pfizer to form Nimet, it was a precision decision that must be taken, and several other ventures within the thing. But what has happened is that Mazi has left his footprint at everywhere he has found himself, working in the line of taking decisions when it matters most. So Mazi, can we hear you now, and let's hear your voice, lend your voice to this particular topic.
Thank you, Stevenson, and thank you, Scott, for that brilliant opener. I'd like to share some slides, if you don't mind, so that I can take you back, because we need to take a few lessons, like you said. What lessons are we getting? What leadership lesson are we taking from this? So that is what we're going to do to go through, because I'm sure all of us know that companies, institutions, communities, and nations arise and fall on the shoulders of leadership. What is central to managing any crisis, anything, is the quality of leadership. And for me, that is the central piece of what we're going to discuss. And I'd like to take you and say, let's look at countries that were perhaps in the same category, in the same developmental status, maybe in the late 60s. Where are they now? Today you have some classifications. You have the Asian tigers, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan. Then you have the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. These countries, along with the ones we call the MINTs, Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, Turkey were all at the same developmental stage in the 60s. But they have changed. Each is at different level. You have the Asian tigers that have become first world, emerging nations of the world, emergent industrialized nations. While some of the countries that were in the same class with them are still called developing countries, third world. Some have moved from third world to emerging nations to first world or industrialized world. Some countries are still on the third world. Why? Leadership. It is leadership. And if you check from the criteria for measuring performance in things like this, you will know that each of those countries are different levels. If you look at gross domestic product, GDP per capita income, life expectancy at birth, under 5 mortality, maternal mortality ratio, school enrollment, primary and all that, you see that there's a wide disparity. And my question is, why is that disparity? What is causing the disparity? It is imagination. It is the ability of each country to determine its own future, to seek how to harness its resources, to be able to deliver and to be competitive. So my slide is not showing, but I hope it will show before I finish. The point here is that if you check gross domestic product for the nations, GDP, or you check GDP per capita income, or you check life expectancy at birth, on the 5 mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, gross enrollment ratio, you see different. The countries that started together are now in different spatial position. And my question is, what can be different and what is different? The story of leadership is so intricately interwoven with every human activity. Are you leading nation? Are you leading companies? Are you leading organizations? Are you leading military military formations? You have to show exceptional leadership, and that is what drives performance, and that's what makes nations, companies, and businesses to thrive. Now, let us look at the global situation of COVID-19. Scott has drawn attention to. If you look today, there are some countries that have flattened the curve and are even already going down. Countries like New Zealand, Taiwan, China, Switzerland, Italy, and Norway. These countries have flattened the curves. Yeah, there may be little breakout here and there. They immediately quarantine and control it. They are controlling the infection effectively. But look at what other countries and see that the curve is still rising. Mexico, India, Nigeria, Russia, Colombia, Brazil. Do you see any difference between these countries where the curve is still rising and those that are flattened it? It is leadership. Some leaders are denying reality. Some leaders are denying science. Some leaders are being wishful, like small children, just hoping that a major crisis will just end by their wishing or by the way they speak or by the way they deny the reality. The Brazilian president, who has been playing jokes, he has caught coronavirus. We don't know what will be the end of the story. People do not know. I mean, I listened to Richard West yesterday on CNN, and he was telling his story about COVID. He caught COVID-19. He was supposed to have been healed, but he remains sick. He's having all kinds of issues. So it is an understanding of what leadership can do. America is the most embarrassing of all the countries in the world, constituting about 1/3 of the deaths today, almost over 25%, and growing at unimaginable. Yesterday, I think about 54 or 50 something or 60,000 people were infected. Who could ever believe 4 months after this thing has started, they are having such a high growth? It is leadership, ladies and gentlemen. We should not run away from it. So for me, what are the leadership lessons that more drive us in dealing with this epidemic or any other epidemic? and how to emerge stronger after this epidemic, because that we're looking at. Number one is vision. We need to have leaders that have vision, who are imaginative, who can think the future, and who can be in a position to always situate what can happen and what is achievable. That's one. Number two leadership lesson is ability to have appropriate educational knowledge. I've come to the realization that education is not equivalent with knowledge, and education is different from knowledge. Some people are educated but they are not knowledgeable. Some people are knowledgeable but didn't even go through formal school. Because when you are properly educated and knowledgeable, you will know your limits. You'll be able. One of the things education teaches you is to I think the slides I showing now. I think we'll move forward. Rather than leadership lessons. Okay, so this is where I am. What leadership lessons? We are talking about vision. I talked about vision, visionary leadership. Look at the leadership that are controlling this, and leadership that I showed you before, where they have moved away from being third world to first world or emergent global leaders. So education and knowledge is important. It is education that lets you know that you do not know much. That's one thing. Anybody that's educated, one thing he knows is that he will tell you he just does not know enough. That's why research fellows who write their PhD report, who do research, when they complete, they always conclude, we have done this much, but there's still much that is undone, and we wish other people would do more. That is education. But when you get a leader who pretends he knows everything, who is his own advisor, who listens to his own, who is interested in what people are, whether they are praising him or they are clapping for him, or whether his numbers are growing in the stock market or in the popularity contest, such a leader cannot manage crisis and cannot manage development. Number three is integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, there's one thing that distinguishes leadership, that's integrity. It's integrity that creates believability. It's integrity that creates confidence, and it's integrity that attracts followership. When a leader becomes a liar, he has lost integrity. When a leadership words cannot be trusted, he has lost integrity. People cannot follow you. You say something today, tomorrow you say another thing. The day you complete yourself without even remembering what you said the day before. Some of the leaders in those countries I showed you where they have not made much progress and they are not properly handling this COVID-19, they are suffering from integrity. They have integrity deficit. Communication. Kenneth, you spoke about communication. It's a critical thing for leaders, especially managing crisis. In what time communication is so important, and that your communication must be direct, clear, and understandable. The other quality or leadership lesson is humility. A leader must be able to be humble, and it is the humility that makes you get proper wisdom. Because without wisdom, you cannot do anything. And wisdom only comes to those who are humble, who are willing to listen to other people, who are willing to bring people who know better than they do and utilize them. So that leadership job is not to do all the job. The job of a leader is not to do the job. His job is to find people who can do the job. If they do the job well, he gets the credit. If they don't do the job well, he gets the flag. So his greatest job is to select people who can work with him. The other leadership lesson is empathy and compassion. You have to beg some leaders to even speak to their people. You have to beg some leaders to address their nations. You have to beg some leaders to follow and empathize when people are losing their lives, to even empathize or sympathize with them or send condolences. You have to beg them. How can such countries do well in a crisis? Courage to stand for what is right, for what you know is correct. It may not necessarily receive applause, but because you are visionary and you can see the future and you can communicate, you can use your courage to let people follow you on a path that they may not be willing to follow. In times like this, not when you just say, do what you like. do what you like. Do what you like. There are people who in a society who are different levels of self-appreciation or self-knowledge or self-awareness. And so if you let them, they rubbish everybody else. COVID-19 is so bad that if it were just to affect you, then you can be stupid. But it will affect you, and then you go and pass it to other people, innocent people. Many of us who are above 60 are staying at home. But some crazy guy will just walk from somewhere and come and infect people who are staying at home. The people didn't go anywhere. So there is a need to stand courageously and speak the truth and stand for what is right and be able to be daring. That is courage. Even to be able to go to the future or to think in an imaginative way and to be able to translate that thinking into reality involves courage. Adaptability. That's the word. Adaptability. Companies and businesses that do not adapt to what is going on now will fail. You must adapt to the new method of work, the new work ethic, the communication mode, and all that is happening. Companies need to quickly. Some companies have refitted their machinery. They have refitted their processing. They have even changed products because the product you have, nobody's buying it. You want to die? You want to be adaptable. Choose new products. Refit your equipment. Refit your process to produce new products and services. That is lesson we are learning because COVID-19 is changing the way the world operates. And adaptability, which the second portion of its innovation and creativity, which was also mentioned by Scott, are things that show that you are adaptable and that you are moving to solve your problem, either within the box or from without the box. Finally, teamwork. Teamwork is critical. Teamwork is important. In a crisis mode, anywhere in the world, you need a team, and that team must be on the same page, speaking, reading from the same page, singing the same tune. Of course, you can have your different parts, but the tune is the same. You have different altos, trebles, tenor, whatever, but it must be the same tune. But if you are in an organization, if you are in a country where people are not speaking the same language and they are communicating to people, it will not work. Where others are being political instead of being scientific, it will not work. Where people are pretending to do one thing where they are doing the other, it will not work. Where anybody who raises opposing view is punished or sacked or dismissed or maligned or victimized, that company, that business, that society, that state will not make progress. Teamwork is where many people work together and then they can have an opportunity to leverage on their different contributions and ideas to produce the best for the organization or for the state. Move on. Let's look at the last bit. Now, let us look at the application going forward. How do I apply these leadership lessons to be able to survive and to be able to thrive and to be able to make tremendous progress in the new post-COVID world? So I believe that we need to do a lot of scenario planning because that is part of visioning. Look at the different options. Scott made some reference to it. Scenario planning is looking at what you are doing, how can you do it better, and what are the options available to you. How can you be imaginative to say, suppose this may happen? Nobody told you that COVID will happen. Nobody. But some people did some scenario planning and say, if this happens, think about what will happen, all the variables, and build them so that if they do happen, you have a response already. If they don't happen, that's fine. But most people lose wars or battles are lost when there's an element of surprise. If you're surprised before you recover, the enemy has taken you. So it is in business as it is in battle. Number 2, base planning on research and expert opinion. Don't base planning on your own hunches only. That will have good hunches, but base it on expert opinion and research and knowledge. That makes the planning much more sustainable and have the better opportunity to succeed. Number 3, restructure, reinvent your organization for sustainable relevance. I made reference to it. You need to now look at your organization. Is it structured? Is it organized in a manner to deliver the product that the community needs, the service that the community needs in this situation. I mean, people who run some businesses, who have event centers, who are in some modes of transportation, I think they have to do a lot of work. Airlines, they need to restructure and reinvent the organization for sustainable relevance, because leisure, tourism, those businesses will take a long time to organize. And some have assets, and those assets need to be restructured and reinvented for new application and new purposes. Adapt technology optimally. I think every company, every business, every country has gotten an opportunity to become technologically savvy. We must optimize it in our research processes, in educational processes, in treating our patients, telemedicine, and all other forms of distance communication, and yet delivering optimal service. And of course, we need to optimize human resource and develop a new work ethic. This is the time many people can juggle many balls. This is the time to look at your money. This time to skill up, or reskill. And those who cannot skill up or reskill, you put them to other jobs or give them something else to do. But organizations will be a lot more smaller, punchy, fewer human beings, because of the distancing and all that will continue to define the way we do work into the nearest future. I think I'll finish with saying that we need to build robust and flexible supply chain, because it has been proven that depending on one supply chain could ruin you. We depended on China, we depended on India. When they closed their borders and even say they were not going to export anything, most countries in the third world, like Nigeria, that depended on China and India, began to shake and flabbergasted. We must upscale investment and funding. That's the only way to avoid a depreciation in the economy, going into a recession. There must be stimulus, a lot of funding, and organizations must take the opportunity to scale up funding and upscale investment. Heighten competitiveness, because that's the only way to survive in the new economy and evolving post-COVID marketplace. Competition is going to grow from two factors: the incipient decline in purchasing power caused by recession that is in front of us, the depreciation of the local currency taking the Nigerian experience, and higher level of unemployment, all will create a shaving off of purchasing power, and that will increase competitiveness in the marketplace. So everybody needs to know how to take a better share of the market by being more customer centric and market driven. Prudent value for money disposition. This is the time to learn how to save and how to get real value for money. There's no place for excesses here and pop-ups and markups. Prudent value for money disposition and management. And then leveraging to build strength. We need to leverage on, or whatever is leverageable. Leverage from partnerships, leverage from associations, leverage from networks, and leverage from other belief systems. I mean, I believe so much in my own faith that you need God in times like this. I mean, other faiths have their own belief system, but everybody needs, because you get to some point where human effort becomes a challenge. You must fall back on something. So these are, for me, some of the issues that we must look at. And my closing shot is that crisis always shows up the best and the worst in leaders. Time for the emergence of new corporate and national leaders. This COVID has shown the weaknesses of our leaders and our businesses and those who lead businesses, who lead nations, who lead corporations. I think it's time for the emergence of new corporate and national leaders. And I'm believing that some people listening to us this afternoon will be among those leaders. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so very much, Amazi Sam Ohabo, OFR, and President, Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria, and former Managing Director of Pfizer. Now, the conversation is just starting. And now we've seen the presentation, And we know very well that this has been an awesome presentation. And I would like to combine the presentation and the with the talk from Scott Brandon, and then also come up from these questions, to both of you. And either one can take it first. But let me say something about the presentation Mazi has done, is to give us the various, a perspective as to what has happened now and where we need to take position. And including the fact that there will be new leadership that will have to emerge. And these leaders must take responsibility, because the way we used to behave will no longer be the way we behave now. So something going forward. And then I would like to now say this. Let's start with corporate world. The corporate world. Right now, there are several ways of which organizations are tinkering as to how to work because of the remote work that is going on. People are working from home. And most times you are working from home. There are no rules like this in the past. All right. And there were no rules like this. Suddenly people started working from home, and there is intellectual property issues here. And there are also the kind of lay down policies that must be given for people to be able to lead the same team you were leading one-on-one. You now have to lead them from home. All right. Which means that instruction must be passed and things must be checked and all those things. Now, the question is, the lesson we have learned now, how do we move forward, especially for corporate leaders right now, in leading from home? I would like to use that word, leading from home, and what we call remote working. Mr. Scott, do you want to take that?
Sure. It's once again, it's interesting because, and thank you, Mazi. I thought that was a brilliant presentation to structure the conversation. I kept thinking through it that I kept asking myself the question, are these leadership traits new, or are these the leadership traits that were key 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Or are they purely as a result of COVID and the changing economic and social structures that come out of it? And my sense is, and through my research, that they're very much questions that have been asked and are being asked for many years, but they're being asked in a different context. The context of today, as Mazi rightly points out, is that we don't have the luxury of failure, of time loss. We're in a crisis mode. We're not in just a decision-making mode. We're in a crisis mode. So what keeps us from making those decisions? You have business leaders all across the world who recognize that we have to shelter in place. We can't bring people together in the workplace. Yet we still talk about working from home or working remotely as an alternative or as the other way in which one can work. That's path dependence. Path dependence in a social science context is doing things the same today because we did them yesterday, and we don't necessarily want to study or precision study the change variables within it. I often use the QWERTY keyboard as one of the prime examples of that. The QWERTY keyboard, if you go to your top left of your computer, you'll see the QWERTY. Well, that started many years ago when we had typewriters. And they were started with typewriters because if you did a typewriter keyboard in a more logical way, the keys would stick as you would type. So they came up with the QWERTY keyboard. But in today's world, we don't have to worry about that because we have computers. We don't use typewriters. So the QWERTY keyboard is actually a relic or a remnant of a past construct that really doesn't serve us today, but the cost, either the social cost or the economic cost of changing it, is too great. So you've got leaders, like Mazi said, you have leaders that know what they want to do or know the direction they need to go, and they're hesitant to do it. Once again, they're often hesitant through a path dependence structure. If you accept what I just said as these leadership skills, these leadership questions have literally been around, just in a new and ever more important context, or said differently, the clock is ticking and we have to address these issues now. COVID in its own way, because it's a pandemic, because it is so divisive, because it is so confusing, and there are countries in the world that have handled it well, but the vast majority have not, or are struggling with how to address it. I think it goes back to, once again, how do you develop a culture or a habit of mind for imaginative thinking to creative action? How do you create that habit of mind within a business construct, within an educational construct, within a social construct? Because if you accept the question or the position that we've been asking these questions for many years, again, the context has changed, but the underlying value sets are similar. The only thing that will change it, in my humble opinion, is if we start to think more imaginatively and act creatively. So the question that I struggle with is, what are the conditions or what are the elements that can help make that happen? I'm working on a book right now, tentatively called IT, and I've named it that because it's the study of the modern marketplace in relationship to what makes a marketplace thrive. We traditionally think of marketplaces as transactional. I have something you want, you have something I want. We sell, we barter, we trade, we do something to exchange those goods. The marketplace has always thrived and been designed for transaction. But what gets missed in the discussion of the marketplace, especially the modern marketplace, and especially the computer-based marketplace, is interaction, the interactive element of it, the part that's about how we learn, how we change, how we know more. And they're often called the soft skills, or the surrounds of the more important part of the marketplace. I've been fortunate in the last number of years to travel a great deal and study the marketplace in many parts of the world. And I used the Silk Road period during the travel route, and I use Constantinople, modern day Istanbul, as an element of it, of what made that marketplace so important. It was, if you've been to Istanbul, you'll still see there's the European side and the Asian side. If you go to the Grand Bazaar, you'll see there's 72 million unique visitors a year in the Grand Bazaar. There's something that was unique about that marketplace. And my argument is that it's the interactive qualities that make the marketplace thrive. It's the transactional qualities that make the marketplace of value. Is your product worth selling? Do people need it? Do people want it? Is it priced appropriately? How do you outwit or outmaneuver your competitors to make sure that your transaction, your marketplace transaction, is what's perceived as of value? It's the interactional part that intrigues me, and I think it's the 21st century challenge as we're talking about leadership, as we're talking about concept development, as we're talking about systems change. Interaction is this kind of interaction. While this is a webinar, in a way this is a civic dialogue. What we're doing is we're talking about civic issues, we're talking about constructive issues, we're talking about important societal issues, and we're trying to extrapolate from a context of today with an illness, a disease, a pandemic disease, and say, what can we do better next? And I would argue once again that we need to practice imaginative thinking and creative action, because it's the only way we will break this path-dependent approach to process and procedures. So the question becomes, how do you get there? And absolutely, vision, education, knowledge, integrity, communication, those are all there. But coincidentally, those are all the same elements of an imaginative thinker. Those are all the same thing that in Imagination First, we interviewed 70 thought leaders. And we asked them the question about their own practice of imagination and how they used it. They were vastly different. But what was interesting is the compilation, the extraction from each of those kept leading us to that we have to think differently. But once again, not outside of the box, because we can't throw away our history and our value sets and start anew. We have to do it with inside the box with a whole different set of values that are there. And the ones Mazi put up are absolutely the ones that need to be highlighted. I would just add to it, once again, empathy is only possible if you're imaginative. You can't be empathetic unless you can imagine what it's like to experience someone else's experience. It's the essence of humility and of imagination. If you think you have the answers, as Mazi said, you've lost your sense of awe. You've lost your sense of maintaining a sense of awe. Everybody don't know, not just how much they do know. That's maintaining. For ambiguity, you have to be able to allow yourself to be in states where the answers aren't readily available or obvious in the moment. The great artist Cezanne once said, "Your eyes see the front of a painting and imagination curves to the other side." And I believe what he meant was we see things and we think we understand them, but we understand them through our cultural context or educational context or economic context or social context, the context in which we live, and that creates political and social entities. But the question is, if you want to look more, refine your vision, refine your capacity to perceive, you have to start learning to be imaginative. And you learn it by vision, but vision for me is deep noticing, is noticing patterns, it's making connections. It's taking the time to notice the difference between something that's objective and subjective, something that can be debated through opinion and something that's verifiably proved. Science is an objective action, but it's an objective action, but it's got a subjective end to it because we don't always know the outcome of the science. But we do know that we have to collect the data points and do the trials, test hypothesis, and move to a more refined and defined position. So for me, if you accept that transaction is a given, and transaction is a given within government structures, within business structures, within social structures, it's how we bring that interactive quality to it, that sense of diversity, that sense of cultural diversity, that sense of thought diversity, that sense of age diversity, that sense of gender diversity, that sense of who we are and how we think as diversities. And going back to the 9/11 report, if you once again accept that we need to routinize, bureaucratize, and institutionalize imagination, to me, that means taking it off its pedestal. Stop thinking of it as if it's rarefied and only for the few, but think of it as, what if everybody started to be more imaginative? What if everyone started to be more creative? And I'm not talking about artistry. I'm talking about imagination in its true form, which is the ability to think of things as if they could be otherwise, to ask the what if question. Creativity is taking the formal elements or language of a discipline and using it in new ways. Innovation is the productive outcome of those, but you cannot be innovative unless you started with imagination. And through our research and looking at thought leaders, we keep coming back to, you have to create a habit of mind, a social construct, a business construct that allows for that type of thinking. Once again, I would go back to much of Mazi's presentation as These are the core essential elements of it. But the goal of it is to create a more imaginative capacity, not just in the CEO, not just in the C-suite, but for everybody within the business construct. Because if you go to Harvard Business School and look at the case studies, my book is one of the case studies, and you look at the reviews, most of the reviews are about organizations and companies that break down at mid-level management, not upper-level management. They usually, the upper-level management reviews and discussions don't get translated down in the same way as needed to the mid-level managers, because more often than not, they don't know exactly what the CEO meant, what the C-suite wants, or they don't know how to implement it because it's a mandate instead of a culture change. It's a mandate instead of perspective change. And if the mandate is just third quarter profits, it's not going to work. It will never work if third quarter profits are the only driving motivation. You have to create the kind of leadership structure, the kind of imaginative capacity building structure. You have to create structures to practice it, to all defeat all of those path dependence elements. COVID is, in its own unique way, I say this with my heavy heart, it's its own way both an opportunity and a challenge, whether you view it as God-given or nature-given challenge, but it is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to change things, rethink things, be imaginative in ways that we've been talking about. We just haven't had the guts because of path dependence to do it. I think if we pay attention to it, the elements that are needed, the kind of research that's needed, the kind of thought process that's needed, will not only become ever apparent, we'll start to realize that it's not as difficult as we think it is. The change process is always further along than what we see. What you see in front of you is not exactly where the change process is. The change process is usually ahead of that moment. What you see is premised on a lag time, and it's how people interpret that change process that creates the lag time. But the change process itself is very dynamic and very forward-thinking. And last but not least, I like to use the comparison of we spend a lot of time talking about the status quo, but in this conversation, we need to think of the avant-garde. We need to think of what tugs at, what nips at, what pushes the status quo forward. Because today's status quo was in some ways yesterday's avant-garde. So in a change-oriented structure, you're always going to have a dynamic tension between status quo and avant-garde, and how you bring those together, how you learn from the lessons of the avant-garde, and how you effectively keep iteratively changing the status quo. I would argue, once again, it's thinking inside the box.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Scott Brandon, and very, very incisive and very, very interesting presentation once again, and I must thank you for that particular talk. Now, let me just the same question to Mazi, but I'd like to add to this organizational structure, sort of state and decision making. Mazi is aware, I'm sure Ms. Mazi is aware that every Wednesday, I'm talking about leadership in terms of governance. Every Wednesday, okay, Nigeria have, we usually have our Federal Executive Council meeting. I've just got pictures from the villa that today's Federal Executive Council meeting was held virtually, and the president actually holding the federal decision making at the highest level, level of governance. There is a lot more to keep track of when you are doing this and managing remote team. There are daily and weekly checks in with team members to make sure what has been done, there is a track record as to whether they have been done. Metric you use to evaluate each employees, even ministers, and their performance, and an ongoing record of who's been assigned with which task, so that no team member has too much or too little to do. How do you now be able to measure that either in the corporate world or in leadership governance, like for instance, a Federal Executive Council meeting, in about 6 months, nobody brings in a memo to decide. Sometimes somebody brings a memo almost every week. So how do you now be sure that the people you put in, in the place of authority, you track to be sure that you can support them to action? That's an addition to what I asked earlier, Mazi.
Thank you, Stevenson, and thank you, Scott, for that very wonderful elaboration. I think the issue is that, in leadership, you have two formats and two categorization, especially when you're thinking about what we're speaking about: imagination, creativity, innovation. Some people are what I call they are reactively innovative. Some are proactively innovative. Now, the reactive innovator is the one who happens to allow situations to precipitate before he now begins to imagine. So he's stopped in his track, his business is failing, share prices, returns are going down, competition has become so high, he has no other choice but to begin to imagine and begin to think and begin to create new realities. That is one set. And for many of us, with due regards, I don't want to put down Africa or those of us who are called third world countries, but the truth is that we belong a lot to that group. We're in the reactive, innovative group. Today, those who want to emerge stronger in the post-COVID era, which is the subject today, navigating COVID-19 and emerging stronger. We are looking at what I call proactive innovators, proactive imaginators, people who create the future, who don't just allow the future to fall upon them and then they're struggling to respond and pretend they're being creative or imaginative. Yeah, imaginative to solve a problem is fine, but it's better to have imaginative to prevent the problem. If imagination can stop a problem from happening, that is better for you, for your business, for your country, for your nation. So we need those kind of leaders now who are driven by proactive imagination, proactive visioning, and who can begin to create the future. The leaders in industry today, is it in ICT, in pharmaceutical marketing or pharmaceutical business, drug companies, the leading drug companies, the leading ICT companies are in that proactive innovation. Who told anybody that we needed Zoom? That we're going to have Zoom, or we need, but did they know there was going to be COVID-19 and people couldn't move around? It was proactive imagination. So I'm not paying enough attention. I'm suggesting that borrowing from Mr. Scott's central team about institutionalizing or routinization of imagination or imaginative thinking, we must design these paradigms and begin to impress upon our nations, impress upon our leaders at different levels to become proactive imaginators, to begin to think before the problem happens, to begin to create the future and create a reality. So that is one. But the difference between the two, really between reactive innovator and proactive, is what I call complacency. Complacency is in the middle. Most people achieve certain level of business growth, of performance, and then they become complacent. They relax and say, let's take it easy. Actually, there's no time to take it easy. In normal global competitive world that we are in, there's no time for take it easy. People often come to me and say, Mazi, take it easy. I say there's nothing to take it easy, because you solve one problem, that problem is solving a problem. And when you're solving a problem, you must anticipate the problem that the other one will create. So it's important that ab initio that we avoid that happening, and generally take away the tendency for to be complacent. Now, we are working from home, and work and decisions have to be made. And so this is when it calls for what I spoke about, teamwork. Teamwork. And a team cannot function except it be glued together. And that glue comes from a number of two main parameters. First is that there's a uniting vision. All of us know where we're going. Ab initio will say we're going there. And we also know the time between where we are and the time to get to where we're going. The moment that is aligned, all of us know where we're going. All of us know that we're not going to achieve that goal in 5 years, that it is the next 3 months we'll achieve the goal or a subset of that goal. The moment that is properly aligned, and then we maintain communication, and then set up markers, what I call markers or milestones along the way. So every month, something opens up. When I became CEO, after our management buyover from Pfizer to Nimet, and I was combining my job with being chairman of Nigeria Economic Summit Group, chairman of president of Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA, etc., etc. So I was spending a lot of time outside my office. Before we came to virtual communication, what I always did, I got a computer expert to come and design some things for me. And in my system, he designed put a software that the moment I came back from a meeting in Abuja and I arrived at my office within 6 p.m., I would just enter my login, and the first thing I need to see is all the transactions that have taken place since I left the office, all the sales, all the income, all the invoices, all the credits, those who have paid, those who have not paid, checks that have been cleared, what is happening with our production facility, how close are they to agreed outputs. In 10 minutes of sitting on my table, I see all that. And sometimes I'll now call one of the directors or those in operations or marketing. I begin to query something that happened 3 or 4 days ago. And they say, but as you are not there, how did you know this happened? I say, well, I have a witch or a wizard somewhere who gives me information. At some point, the directors began to suspect each other, the manager, that maybe somebody is giving me information. But nobody. I had designed a system that was workable, that made sure that when we agreed, you can't say Amazi has traveled, he has gone to Abuja, and so you go and sleep, or you do what you think. By the time I'm at my office, I will see what everybody has done in 1 week. I begin to call them. I begin to ask them, what are you doing? This is not what we agreed. Sales are low. Production is not meeting its target. And that helps people. So whether I'm there or not, everybody will come. So we must begin to get leaders who can measure performance, who are performance driven, who are target driven, who are achievement driven. Because when the leader does not know whether people are going forward or backwards, they do not know when they give orders whether they obeyed or not. When they ask people to relocate, they don't relocate. They ask people to bring reports. There's no way such an organization or such a group can work, much more now that we have to do things online. So the unity of purpose through a vision, shared value, agreement on objectives and markers, and also what I call a well-ordered incentive scheme. Because most human behavior is driven by incentive. There must be something that drives behavior. You can call it motivation, but there's something that drives behavior at work and in a nation. If you want Nigerians to be patriotic, there is an incentive you give them to become patriotic. It's not to tell them to be patriotic. It don't work. Preach from now till the end of till Jesus comes back. You will not have any patriotic person. The leaders must provide incentive for patriotism. Every action you want at work, in your home, in the company, at anywhere to to be sustainable, you must motivate that activity through incentives. Now, the incentives come in different forms. They don't have to be monetary. It's just the fact that somebody knew that if Mazi is not in the office, he will still know what he did. It's an incentive for him to do well. But if whether he did it, he didn't do it, nobody cares. He will go to his comfort zone. Satan will begin to suggest certain things to him, and he will listen and begin to be complacent. So these are the kind of things that we need to put in place to be able to be sure that we maintain performance much more at this time when we are working remotely from home. We cannot maintain that performance until everybody has this shared vision, shared responsibility, shared objectives, milestone markers, and how those milestones are marked, and then the reward for doing your work and punishment in quotes for not doing it. If there's no difference between the person who did well and the person who didn't do well, there'll be no progress in a company, in a business, in a nation. So an incentive scheme is appropriate to continue to drive top performance and make us become better and stronger post-COVID.
Actually, I was always wondering, that Mazi, Nigeria Economic Summit Group, Nigeria American Chamber of Commerce, managing director of this, and how were you were able to, at least I've got something today, that how you were able to combine all these, gamut of responsibilities into one, and you are able to make sure everything is succeeding. Now, I'll just ask Scott to also let his voice of what you just said, ensuring that people do what they do and also be happy at what they do, so that working remotely will be smoother than the fact that they want to see you. People want to see you. Some of them want to be sure that whatever, I want to be able to have a conversation with who is leading me, and then so that they can prepare themselves. Do you have something to add to this, Mr. Scott, please?
Yes. Once again, thank you, Mazi. I love the clarity of your presentation. I keep thinking back to why isn't this working? And the term precision keeps coming up again in my thinking, is that to do everything that Mazi's talking about, it takes research. And I'm not talking about drug testing research with 3 levels of trials and I'm talking about research in the spirit of data collection. The leader that Mazi's talking about is someone who takes the time to not only document and highlight his or her own learning process and leadership process so that it's ever acknowledged, it's ever seen, but she or he is also someone who helps lead by hiring good people, trusting them, setting metrics, setting markers. But there's the question within it is how do you keep reinforcing that? And can you reinforce that unless you're face to face, unless you're in a different, a more traditional business context? I believe, and once again, I can only speak from the places I have visited of late, I believe that this new normal will be that we don't have a similar marketplace to what we had even 6 months ago, let alone 10 years ago. I think we're on the cusp of an entirely different marketplace. I think the computer generation era has opened up the potential for us to think differently, not only about the workforce, but also about the marketplace itself. So I actually believe that the need to think anew about, through COVID, post-COVID, about the workplace itself is a key question within this discussion, within any discussion moving forward. A number of years ago when I was at Lincoln Center, I was approached by the telephone company to start a distance learning program. This was almost 20 years ago, so this was well before many of the issues we're talking about today. And when I was first asked by the phone company to do this, which was to create a learning center that was connected through fiber optics to schools, cultural organizations, and businesses throughout New York City, and it was using the distance learning construct with the idea that it was originally designed in rural America, where you didn't have enough money to hire a chemistry teacher or a physics teacher or a math 4 teacher for every school, because there weren't enough students to fill those classes. So you did it remotely. You did it through a distance learning design. And when I was first approached by it, I said, I don't believe in it. I don't believe it's possible. I don't think it's good. I think that transactional, interactional quality will get lost between what I have to offer, what my organization has to offer, and what the customer or the client needs. But I agreed to try it and try it, earnestly. After 2 years of doing it, I became a total convert. That the elements of learning and the elements of interaction that were capable through a technologically motivated or driven enterprise versus everybody in the same place working together, that I came to the conclusion, once again, this was 20 years ago, that we had to change that was not the way in which businesses were going to be organized in the future. And once again, I didn't believe it initially, but I came to believe that not only were there benefits, the benefits far outweighed any losses around communication, directness. What it did is it forced us to go back to the value sets and the idea sets that Mazi was talking about. It puts those front and center, or said differently, if you did a study of most marketplaces and you look at productivity within that marketplace, you'll start to see there's a tremendous amount of time wasted or unused within the day if you bring people together in a marketplace in an organizational construct. So I believe that we're in the cusp of a virtual marketplace, a virtual workforce, a virtual designed world. Will it be for everybody? Of course not. Not all jobs are conducive to that. There are many jobs that you can't do that way. But I think that the sooner we start to do the research, the sooner we start to do the efficacy studies, do the impact studies of one versus the other, or one in tandem with the other, instead of creating an and or, create a both plus approach, and look at this as an opportunity for a different type of leadership structure, a different type of workplace structure. And while I don't want to thank COVID for any of this, because that would be both gross and disingenuous, I do want to say that I think it's providing the world an opportunity to question and ask things that we might not have been bold enough to ask even 6 months ago, in the way that we're forced to ask it today. And just by the fact that we're having this conversation, that I'm in New York, I'm in California, and you're in Nigeria, I'm heartened by the fact that we're asking these questions, we're discussing these worldwide. And I can tell you, I spend 2 to 4 hours a day on the phone with people from around the world through the projects that I work on. The questions are so similar and so almost reactive to a proactive need, that unless we do what Mazi said, is look at it through a proactive, imaginative capacity, we're going to keep doing what Albert Einstein said, is do things the same over and over again, expecting a different outcome, is the definition of insanity. And that we will continue to do that over and over again and not affect change. And this challenging moment in time, this almost unprecedented pandemic global effort that has hit the economies of the world and the needs of people all over the world will lose whatever benefit could come from it. And I personally don't feel we have that ability. We don't have that luxury. I think if that happens, societies as we know it will change, will start to go down in GDP, will go down in productivity, will go down in social and emotional awareness. But if we do constructively, proactively, precision-wise address this, I think we're on the cusp of something that could be globally extraordinary. And that's the pragmatic optimist.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask her, so it won't be just me asking questions. Mrs. Van, do you have questions? We have just about 30 more minutes. It's better to be 1 hour. If you have questions, you can raise up your hand if you're participating in this conference. I know we have over 100 people that registered, and don't forget, we will share the whole conversation on our YouTube channels, and also send you the papers that have been presented to your email. I see that so many of us are dropping our emails, and don't never mind, we'll send you the presentations. However, I would like to give others the opportunity to ask some questions and going forward.
Okay, I think I have a question there for either Mazi or Mr. Scott. We know that since the World War II, recessions are caused by economic policy mistakes, oil shocks, financial bubbles, and all that. And the incidence of COVID-19 and all the traits that have come with it looks as if we are tending to recession, or we are already almost there, already there. I want to ask, what will be your advice for us on how to brace a potential recession that may have resulted from the pandemic globally?
All right, make a copy, because recession means contraction of economic activity or economic output, and in the world, the whole world is really going into recession, largely because of the shutdowns and the reduction economic activities that have happened. So that is a consequence, because when you lock people at home, they are not producing. Maybe they're just consuming and they are not replenishing. So by natural consequence of those 3 months or 4 months, depending on which country you are in, or 5 or 6, because the matter is still developing. Some are relocking or quarantining. So that is the issue. So that is one. And also in our own case, especially most of majority of the audience here are Nigerians. The other problem is that we are also dependent on one commodity for our foreign exchange earning, which is oil. Now, one day, I think it was either May or June or April, prices of oil came to minus, where oil sellers had to pay people to give them parking space, oil tankers, or storage space. So oil has warned us. We received this warning several times, that somehow we are still unable to reduce our dependence on oil. Of course, we reduced in its contribution to GDP. We have diversified GDP contribution to the economy by other things like telecommunication and also forth and so on. But our dependence on foreign exchange, we are still 93% dependent on oil as foreign exchange. So the recession is before us. There's no escaping. World Bank is projecting 3.9 contraction this year. African Development Bank is talking about 3.2. Whatever it is, we're going to have an economic contraction. Now, it's going to affect us at 2 levels. National level, global level, and then individual or business levels. For me, if I was to advise a country like Nigeria, what should we do to deal to prevent or minimize the impact of COVID, of a recession, impending recession? I would tell them to do a couple of things. First is quickly, directly, and diversify national export income. Quickly diversify from crude petroleum to other products. We have many of them, many of them. We can begin to refine petroleum and export and gas. We can get agri products, raw and processed, hides and skin, solid minerals, and so many things we can today. Most of these are we already have the basic, the plants are there. It's a question of expanding, building new, putting new plants on planting new product, by harvesting the existing one and commercialize them. Many of them are perennial products. So we must move away from oil. If we don't move away, we shall be in this roller coaster, boom and bust. It has dogged the economic performance from the early 70s to now. Number two, we need to dismantle all blocks to enterprise development. There are too many roadblocks to doing business in our country. So let's make it easy to do business in Nigeria through taxation, elimination of bureaucracy, toll gates, and all sorts of things that sometimes make it look like it's a crime to do business in Nigeria. Thirdly, is to liberalize business funding. We are seeing the stimulus in the economy, some stimulus by the fiscal authorities, some stimulus by the monetary authorities, but we need to do more and make sure there's single-digit borrowing and long-term loans and focus on the MSMEs. That is the way to liberalize the economy and create additional input and output that will reduce unemployment and people going out of job. Number four is enthrone a regime of law and order, a regime of law and order. Deal ruthlessly with security issues, have an independent judiciary, enforce rules, law, and regulation, and stop policy flip-flops. Policy flip-flops. Today, or was it yesterday, I was reading in a Business Day. The title is Armstrong Strong Arm Tactics Threatening Nigeria's 1 billion broadcasting industry. Some recent policy coming out from NBC that is already rattling the broadcasting industry, which is like going back to control, going back to limiting the flexibility and the liberalization that had really happened. Governments are always in that difficulty. Should we give out more or hold back more? But the truth is that you get more by giving out more. That is the truth. The more you can attract private capital, whether it be in infrastructure, in business, in enterprise, in social, whatever it is, private sector capital is more efficient and better managed and brings development quicker because it is bereft of bureaucracy and delays that come from budget spending. And finally, enthrone a regime of incentives for export-driven manufacturing. A regime, a bouquet of incentives that will drive us into export manufacturing, not just these things we're doing touch and go. We are soon going to we have the opportunity in ECOWAS, we have opportunity in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Nigeria doesn't look prepared, but this COVID should give us an opportunity to upscale. I'm glad that the COVID has led us to begin to talk about research and development, begin to talk about looking inwards, putting money to research to develop local substitutes, local products. CBN is driving it. I think we need to do a lot more, create opportunities. These 5 things, I believe, and a lot more, but a few more before I stop. We should also support local products, create value chains. We should aggressively develop infrastructure using the PPE model. Let's have private-public model and reduce cost of governance and banish corruption. Reduce cost of governance, banish corruption, and start to have value for money in everything we do. So that's for government. What about individual companies and individual businesses? My summary is part of the things I spoke earlier on, but just to be specific, if we want to beat recession for individual and companies and businesses, number one is recreate or re-engineer your business to fit into the new assumptions post COVID-19. Number two, embrace technology, digitization, e-commerce. You must be on the e-commerce train. If you cannot sell anything on e-commerce, you probably will. Whatever you're selling may not be sellable in the next couple of years. Adopt new marketing focus using online advertising and promotion. You can manage your sales team and sales structures remotely. They can call on prospects anytime, no longer depending on beginning and closing hours of work. Optimize the funding opportunities, the 50 billion MSME COVID-19 intervention, several agri offerings, agri credit guarantee scheme, agri credit support scheme, commercial agriculture credit scheme, Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, National Development Bank, NISA Microfinance Bank. Money is around town now. Let all small and medium look for ways to get this money. 5, aggressively seek export opportunities. I just spoke about that, both as a nation and as individual companies. 6, optimize HR. Minimize or eliminate redundancies, adapt new work ethic, working from home, train, skill up, reskill. 7, optimize costs. Review and renegotiate all cost elements. Use virtual commerce. Adopt prudent value for money savings culture, as I say, and continue to leverage. Build up your muscle by leveraging instead of doing it alone. These are some of my suggestions for us to beat recession, both as a nation and as individual companies and organizations.
Thank you very much, Maz. We will come to Mr. Scott to comments on that. But I see Sheyi, who is raising up his hand. I wanted to find out if the question tally around with this. Yes, Sheyi, you can actually ask your question.
Thank you, sir. He basically asked what the leadership, the national Nigeria, the situation, almost all the sources of revenue, affected. The tax was, nothing was actually happening in the economy. Of course, there is nothing to practice on, even though we are still saying that even the VAT rate is low. When you look at the importation or exportation business, it was at standstill because most nations closed their borders. And then, of course, at a time like this, we said, for us to get ourselves out of recession, this is a time that ordinarily the government should be spending more money. And yet, the complaint is that a lot of the government has actually, maybe Nigeria has already overborrowed, looking at, when you look at the indices and the ratio. So some of the time, you start to ask yourself, what can actually the national leadership do at a time? How can they get themselves out of this, ending recession or whatever it is that we are likely going to get, given those parameters that has been given either by or whatever, the contraction the national leadership do. What do we expect them to do at a time like this? Are they going to again continue to borrow, or what they actually do to get the economy moving? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I want to believe that Mazi actually touched on some of those points, some of the questions. Mr. Scott, do you want to also let your voice in today's, or also what could, most of the things he is asking about right now, especially in the developing world?
Yeah, I couldn't hear most of the question.
You take borrow, you take loan. He was actually asking the question about getting out of recession, especially which is almost like it's going to happen, and the nation, the leaders of developing world, going cap in hands to World Bank or to IMF to borrow money, and then rather than to scale up on what you have and be able to develop from within. Because what the NIMA has done is to actually allow us to develop from within. But if we are still going out to do the traditional borrowing outside, then there must be something wrong or something we are not doing right. So how do we scale up in terms of our own capacity so that we can grow within rather than, I like to use the word where, when President Trump came into office, he said American first. And that actually helped the American industries to get back to work. Even within now that the recession, the whole pandemic, many people are getting back to work. I think from that point perspective is what he was asking that. So what should they do? What should the leaders do at this point? I don't know if you got me.
Yeah, I'm still only picking up parts of it, but let me try to answer. And once again, I would turn it over to Mazi because I think he's probably closer to this than I am. But the pandemic, at least from my perspective, is it's a moment in time, and as a moment in time, an incredibly important moment in time, but a moment in time. The question I'm struggling with, and many of the people I'm interacting with, is what were the conditions that existed that could be prevented? What were the conditions that existed that were inevitable? And if we're talking about changing the design of funding for businesses, the way in which countries view businesses, in a funny way, this is going to force that question. It's going to force a set of value discussions that maybe is long overdue, maybe has been occurring. The injustices and the inequities that existed before are just being highlighted. They're not created because of COVID necessarily, but they were already there. Many of them were there at the very least. So I guess what I'm saying is to take this moment and over-expect from it might not be the right strategy, and at the same time to ignore it is naive and undisciplined. So I think the principles that have been presented throughout this conversation are the foundational principles that need to be paid attention to moving forward. The problem with it is the inequities and the injustices and the concerns that have been there. Yes, I think that the U.S. economy got hit, and I also think it will survive. I think it will come back. Whether it will look the same is the question, not whether it will come back in any way. How that impacts and how other economies around the world respond to this, I think that's where imagination is going to keep playing out. It's how we can imagine new scenarios, and by the way, imagination is not fantasy. It's a constructive way of looking at problems. It's a way of saying, here are the elements that created this. Here's what we can learn from by studying the set of values. But it's having that curiosity and that the wherewithal to stay true to the set of questions. And from that, I'll go back to, I fear that if we don't layer this on everything we're talking about, not just as a value set, but as a directional tool, we're going to keep repeating the same issues, and every time they happen, be surprised that we're slammed from whatever concern it is. So, from my humble viewpoint, I think the best we can do from this is do a massive amount of research. I think every business leader should be researching their own value set, the value set of the organization. comparing that or defending that against the vision and the values of the company, working with the individuals within the company to redefine it. In terms of governments, I wish I had more faith in governments to be the solution to much of this. I would go back to more can be done if people speak their mind and speak their voice and put it into play. Governments will follow. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not true. But I would not put a lot of stock in government solutions, especially not today.
Very much. I think Mazi could, also, we are rounding up in the next 10 minutes, in the next 10 minutes, thereabout. And I hope Mazi can actually assist because from his first comment was the fact that for the first 1 month of this whole pandemic, his company was virtually doing nothing. Right now, we are seeing government in face with this recession. I know that Mazi has laid out some of the reawakening, resetting the whole priorities going forward in terms of the areas to cover, agriculture and the rest. But an entrepreneur, I think that's what is, would be more valuable to Mr. Seyi now. I don't know. An entrepreneur, what should they do now? Mazi.
Well, yeah, for the purpose of rehearsing what I say, if I'm an entrepreneur, which I am, what I do now is I'm looking at all the businesses that I have. I'm trying to reformat them and restructure them to be sure that I'm still going to offer the services that are acceptable. First and foremost, I'm looking at where is the pool, where is the demand, what is the pool now, because so many of us are hooked on forcing goods and services to the market. I don't know have that luxury. The luxury we have now is what do they need? Face caps, garments, protective equipment. Can I play in that area? Is there anything I can do to link up with people who are making garments in Abo, in Aba, or somewhere else? How can I get garments, protective garments, face caps, face shields? That is what I'm looking at. Agriculture. I have a farm in Ikorodu, so I need to go to the Bank of Industry or the CPN and get funding. As a matter of fact, people have come to my farm to ask if we need a loan. And I said, well, we will be coming back to you. Let's be sure we need loan because my life experience is that it's easy to borrow. It's not too easy to borrow though, but it's much difficult to pay. And this is not grants. So people shouldn't take loan until they plan money and see income stream and the cash flow people then pay. So that's the first thing I'm doing. I'm looking at my business, looking at the model, remodeling them to be relevant to the audience needs and demands. In the pharmaceutical company where I am a director, we're looking at what are the products people are looking for. They are looking for zinc. They are looking for hydroxychloroquine. They are looking for some herbal medication. How can we get into those areas? What clinical trials should we do to make sure that we are producing what we want, not giving them what we are used to producing, which may not be relevant to them today? So that's the first thing I'll ask any entrepreneurial business to do. Take a look at your business. Is the market that you see growing or is it declining? If it's a declining market, it's about time to look for a growing market because it's tough thing to compete in a declining market. You have to look for a growing market. There is space for competition, and with proper advertising and product offering, you can get larger space to perform. So this would be my advice. And then aggregate, look at your structure. How are you delivering the service? Today, we're working online. So do we need everybody to work with us? Or can we reschedule people work in the days or work in the night? What are the kind of things that will make it easy for all of us to work and be more productive at cheaper cost to us? Must we do what we're doing now? We ask ourselves every step we're taking, every process, every procedure, must we do them? If we do them, what will happen? What else can we do? So a total conversation. Sit down with your men. Is it you and your PA? Is it you and your manager, your sales? Sit down, spend time, and you will format the business and make sure you are currently in the right position. Government says they are lending money, and they have been said who will get the money. So if you are not in that area, you can't go and ask them to change the plan they have. They already have their plan. If you can adjust, if you can start a new business that is in that area, fine. If you can remodel the one you have, I'm not saying run away from your business, but the point is, any business that has a future is either the business that is taking advantage of the future or the business that is creating the future itself. Either create the future or take advantage of the future. That will be overall recommendation on this, so as not to take too much time.
Thank you very much. We're coming for the last word from both of you. About I would like you to speak through this our own statements as regard this conversation, and then so you can take your last word, from what's from what we are going to say. Well, like we said, most of the time in our conversation, as tragic as coronavirus is, scientists warn that it won't be the last public health challenges to confront the global community. Just as the lessons of the past apply to the realities we face now, we need to be learning new lessons from the current crisis that we can carry forward. It all starts with skilled principles and compassionate leadership. I would like to, Mr. Scott, to take it from that point of view, and whether we are making sense with our last sentence, and then Mazi can just also follow suit so that we can round up this.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that the statement you just read is cogent and relevant, that we need to pay attention to those elements. Where I would add is the marketplace has to change if we're going to survive. The marketplace has to grow if we're going to survive. And who controls that marketplace? It's the leaders, it's the shareholders, it's the boards, it's the people who purchase products. I'm a total and absolute believer that unless you place social good along with corporate profits, you're inevitably going to keep repeating the same bad habits or the same practices. And as Mazi said, it has to be relevant. It has to be relevant to the needs of society and the people that the product or the company is serving. So how do you get there? You create the kind of construct, the kind of thinkers and doers that we've talked about today. And you systematize it. You don't just talk about it. You don't just theoretically wax philosophic about it. You systematize it. And none of that will come from, going back to the question of, who is a leader. The leader should be the one that's always looking and seeing what's around the next corner, what's possible, where the blocks are, not just responding to the problems, not just responding to the issues. So if that leader of today is capable of being that proactive thinker, that in-the-box proactive thinker, that constructive, pragmatic, optimistic thinker, then I believe we as a society, we as individuals, in relationship to our governments, I think we'll pull this off. I think we have to think in that pragmatically optimistic way. If we don't do it, then the issues and concerns that we're talking about that are both pre-COVID and through COVID are only going to get worse. So the question in my mind is, it's not a question should we, it's a question of how can we not. It's a question of, how can these changes not be made if we really are authentically and compassionately interested in change. And finally, I always think of what would a third grade boy or girl listening to this conversation take away? And now it's not designed for them, so much of the conversation would not be something they would understand. But the the viewpoint I want to put forth with it is, do we want them to leave the conversation thinking that it's dismal, it's defeated, there's no possibility? Or do we want them to listen to it and say, there are challenges, there are goals, there are needs. My generation as a young person is going to have to pick up and do a lot of this. I want that child to leave, that third grade girl or boy to leave with a sense of optimism, of possibility. And the only way that's going to happen is if we keep stretching, exercising, developing that imaginative capacity. And everything we're talking about today goes back to that construct. It's all about creating the kind of leadership, the kind of organizational designs, the kind of iterative process, the kind of transaction meets interaction, and admitting that business as usual has to change. And COVID is going to force that conversation, whether governments are smart enough or facile enough to move, I don't know, but I do believe business can. And I do believe business will. The question is, how do you monetize the change? How do you figure out how to build the change into your business plan? And that's where I go back to every business leader is already thinking about these things. The question is, what's driving their decision? Is it just third quarter profits? Is it social good? Is it the betterment of their effort? And we have to get away from past practice as precedent and start to think anew.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. We truly have just been educated so well enough as long as our participant at this webinar. Mazi, going forward and what we can carry forward, it starts with skilled principles and compassionate leadership. Are we right on this?
You're very great. Sorry, have I lost you?
Yeah, I can hear you, sir. Okay.
I see that you're very right. Remember, the subject of this discussion is how can emerge stronger and leadership less. So leadership is a child, and we need leaders that are not skilled, but enlightened, knowledgeable, visionary, and self-sacrificing. That empathetic leader who can make sacrifice for the good of the people, who does not think about himself first, but thinks about the good of the people. There are very few of them. And this is why Mr. Scott talked about not just talk about them. We need to look for proven leaders. I mean, if a man says he can build you a 10-story building, let him show us 2 stories that he built before, 1, so that we can believe him. Because enthroning leadership that is based on promise is what is putting us here. Then they go and they don't deliver because they have no idea of how to deliver. So let's look for informed leadership, and that's a challenge. Of course, every corporate organization takes that seriously. They ask you, what have you done before? Before they promote you, they look at what you've done, and they can imagine that you can do more with the proper motivation and training and all that. But in political leadership, sometimes we live on promissory notes, and those promissory notes are denied or dashed. So going forward, because there are going to be more epidemics, there are going to be more crises, global economic climate crisis, economic crisis, financial crisis, and all they will occur whether we like it or not. The only guarantee is that at each point in time, we have leaders who are visionary, who are looking to the future, who are imaginative, who are creative, and who are self-sacrificing, knowledgeable, and empathetic. That's what we need. And it's possible to have it in most nations if people are careful in making the selection of people. Look at their background. Look at where they're coming from. All the stories we are hearing about some leaders were already available if we are sought. But we close our eyes and say, no, it will be okay, it will be okay. Now we are seeing it's not okay. It's not only in Nigeria, elsewhere in the world. So this is my closing point. That leadership, as I said, nations roar or soar or decline. They rise and fall on the shoulders of leadership. And crisis produces good leaders and bad leaders. There is no guarantee, but you have a better chance of having success if you can put leaders that are proven, that have a proven track record. Then the disappointment may be less than we currently have in many climbed today. Thank you very much.
Very much, Mazi. Before I hand over to Mrs. Van to just round up and thank all our guests and our speakers, let me just leave with an additional information from our own end. Building that simple connection with your team working remotely will more than pay for itself as you lead your remote team work through difficult times and beyond. And I believe that every leader must understand that it's a new way of doing things, even though we've appreciated it before. Like we have listened to Mazi, who has said that while he was the CEO of this, president of this, he was able to create a platform that allows him to see everything and everybody was on the same page. So also, working remotely, that will be very easy for him to do. But for every other leaders, they need to take something away from this, that you must be consistent, you must be productive, and you also must listen and also inform your team members in order to move forward, whether you are running a government or you are running an enterprise. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Scott, and also Mazi, for letting your voice to this. Like I said earlier on, we have over 100 people that registered for this, and we are going to ensure that the papers are shared, and also the team put on video will be on the YouTube channel of Inside Business Africa, and also Natafam David Consulting ng.com. So we will share all this information with our people. I'm very, very delighted, Mr. Scott. You were able to join us from all the way from the United States, and Mazi Samo Habua, always on point, and we are very, very grateful. You've always supported us all these years, and we will never take it for granted. Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody that participated, and as honorable speakers or discussant and Mr. Stevenson, we want to thank you so much for this insightful discussion and deliberation. And this is I just want to say that this is just the beginning of the series. We are going to have a lot of this in the nearest future. Thank you so much. God bless you.
And to you.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.